Okay, hello everybody. This is Michael Tucker coming to you from North Carolina for Republicans for Harris. We're in the last stretch of we have just a small amount of time that's coming up here, actually, for you to be able to exercise your vote and make a difference in protecting America and our American democracy from Donald Trump and forces that would try and undermine our government and basically prevent things like the peaceful transfer of power. So we're trying in the home stretch here. We want to be able to pull together and introduce other Republicans who are making the conscientious choice to be able to put country over party and vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to serve as the executive in our next round of government. So part of that effort, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who is really special, who we've connected with, who is in our state of North Carolina, who has a really interesting background working with the true Republican Party. Think about the previous leaders who have been in charge of running our party, and have not the group that we're seeing right now with Donald Trump and these MAGA extremists. And so I want to introduce you to Mary Jane Murphy. MJ, welcome. Thank you so much for taking some time here. You have a very interesting background here, having just worked with the party in a lot of different positions over the years. I do a disservice to try and say it myself. So I would love you if you would be able to just kind of kick off and kind of introduce yourself to everybody and talk a little bit about your background working with the Republican Party at different points in your career.
Yep, my name is MJ Murphy, and in the past, I spent 25 years in Washington, D.C., and I did work for what I call the former Republican Party, the way the party used to be. I worked as a press secretary for Senator Mitch McConnell during his first term, and I also served in both the George H. Bush administration and Health and Human Services, working for the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Novello. And I also served in the George W. Bush administration, working for the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration under Dr. Runge, who is a fellow North Carolinian. He was the administrator. So we did, auto safety and emergency medicine safety and all those kinds of things. And I subsequently have gone back into working what I used to always do, clinical medical stuff. So that's what I'm doing for right now. But I worked for 6.5 years on Capitol Hill. So I saw firsthand how Capitol Hill should actually work. And it's not these days, unfortunately. And I worked under two great presidents too.
What was that experience like in terms of kind of the difference in terms of some of the principles maybe that you operated as an employee in those administrations, and kind of how that contrasts with what you've seen of the kind of current rhetoric from the Trump group.
Well, it's unfortunate now because there were always the Republican and Democratic parties. People always had their views, but we respected each other. We respected each other's views. I can remember nights on the Senate floor or in committee hearings where the senators would be debating, and the Democrats would clearly be on one side. Kennedy might be on one side. Jesse Helms might be on another side. But when they walked out the door of the committee room or off the floor, they were respectful. They were cordial. They also worked together. There'd be times when they'd be in conference committee, and that's when a bill comes from the Senate or the House, and it differs, so they have to work on it before final passage. And they would get in the committee room and they would work together, and they would all talk, and they would kind of say, hey, you've got to give up 5 million here. You've got to give up 10 million here. We've got to get some kind of piece of legislation that can go to the Hill that is for the good of the American people. And they would work together. Nowadays, it's so partisan rhetoric. They won't even talk to each other. They insult each other. They call each other names. Committee hearings, you would never have done that. You would have, if you disagreed with your colleague, you would have said, my distinguished colleague, I disagree with what you're saying for this reason. And then you would present facts. Nowadays, there's so many falsehoods out there, and people They just are not working together. And where I get the feeling with, Kamala Harris and with Tim Wells, they're going to work on both sides of the aisle. They have in the past. They're going to reach out. They want the greater good for America, not for their party, not for themselves. And that's what disturbs me the most about Trump. He is only in it for himself. That's all he cares about. And he just kind of, especially lately, all of his, and I have watched some of his rallies just so that I can see what he says. And he's so negative and dark, and he makes us sound like we're almost a third world country. And it's not what the American principles, and not what our founding fathers, created this nation, this form of government. And he's very divisive. He's very negative. He's very dark. It's very disparaging with the name calling that he calls people stupid. What he says about the military, that they're losers and suckers. I have lots of family, and I'll be honest, I'm originally from Canada. I am a naturalized citizen, became a citizen when I was 18,
Mm.
so my whole family. So that's also insulting to me that he plants all the immigrants as being evil, criminal, awful people who just come to America and don't do anything. I came to America with my family. We came in legally. My dad
Mhm.
worked hard. I worked hard. I even worked, and now I serve. I had served in the government. So those kind of remarks that he makes all the time. I have 6 grandkids.
Mhm.
Do I want them looking up to President of the United States who only can name call people and insult people and be rude to people? No, that's not what I want. Leadership should be somebody who is willing to work with all parties, who is willing to for the good and the betterment of everybody, not just
Mhm.
themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, really, that's really encouraging to kind of hear about how it used to be, and that there was a lot of this kind of cross partisanship as you're kind of working to be able to kind of get policies in place.
Oh, I saw
Um,
that a lot. That's what's so disturbing about the Republican Congress, in the last 4 years has been just stagnant and stalemate. They've squashed so many good pieces of legislation that could have happened, that could have taken care of the immigration problem, could have
yeah,
taken care of some of our economic problems, but they were only in it for the party. And that's the thing where Trump squashed the immigration bill, and
yeah,
that was a
that's
bipartisan bill with a very conservative senator taking the lead, a Republican conservative senator taking the lead, working with Democrats, doing what they used to do, working across the aisle. And then they just squashed it because Trump wanted it to be an election issue. He wanted to be able to say that nothing had happened with immigration. And that's not true at all. Yes, it's bad when the criminals come across, and we don't have enough people down there on the border. And what this legislation would have done, it would have given us more manpower at the border. It would have given us more judges to handle the court situations when people are immigrating. There's paperwork involved. There's all kinds of things involved. So it seems like the Republican Party has just it's not the Republican Party that it used to be.
yeah,
It's
it's
the Bush.
interesting when
It's
you
not the
think
party
about.
of Bush, McCain, Ronald Reagan would be rolling over, I think, in his grave if he could see what the Republican Party has become now.
I was just thinking about that too, about so you're talking about a piece towards the middle and end of this current legislative session with the border bill. And I was thinking about the piece at the beginning about how long it took with the Freedom Caucus trying to force out Kevin McCarthy, and how many days was the whole House locked because they were going back and forth trying to get a resolution just to be able to have the Speaker of the House endorsed, to be able to be in place. And what it was, like a month, I think, almost, there where absolutely nothing got done because
They didn't work on
our
any
party.
legislation. Yeah, it was all partisan. It was all Republican bickering, frankly, amongst themselves, not even amongst the Republicans versus Democrats. It was the Republicans fighting amongst themselves. What really gets to me, I'm sorry, but when the committee hearings, the name calling,
Yeah,
you never did that. People should have genuine respect for each other. Everybody has a right to have their own view and their own opinions, and that's fine. And that's what the founding fathers, they created this nation that we could do that. But you don't call people names. You don't insult people. You don't disrespect people. And that's one of the things that I think it's almost the Republican Party has almost become the party of how much can you insult and disrespect people.
yeah, 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 yeah. It really is.
Instead of
Is
focusing on, like you say, the issues, the economy, things that need to be focused on. They aren't concentrating on that. They're too busy bickering and for the so-called party good. But the Republican Party, I mean, so many of my friends who were Republicans, fellow co-workers, are no longer Republicans. I don't list myself as a Republican anymore. I want to list myself as an independent because I'm so embarrassed by what's happened to the Republican Party. And
Let me
that's
unpack
sad.
that.
That's
Let
really
me
sad.
unpack let me unpack that for a little bit actually too, because there's a lot of so we're a week and a half away from election day here in 2024 as we're recording this, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that are sitting on the couch or on the side or really conflicted about what they're going to do in this election for a lot of the feelings that you and I probably share. And so it would be interesting to kind of understand your background from in terms of a timeline. When did you really kind of say, wow, Trump is really not reflective of what I feel, and then kind of look at that and say, well, what am I going to do about that, right? And so, do you still consider yourself a member of the Republican Party at some point in that process too, or do you kind of look at that and say,
I'll be happy to be a member of the Republican Party if we start getting the leadership that we should.
yeah,
And if it's I was always a Republican up until the time with Trump. And when Trump was first running, I was extremely concerned because he didn't have a background. I mean, when I look at working for George H. Bush, George Sr., he had such a great background. He had been a congressman. He had served overseas. He'd been head of the CIA. He'd been vice president. He had a background. He knew how government worked, federal government, and he made it work. He worked with those in the government. He worked with those Democrats of the other party. Trump did not. Trump was never even on a city council. He was never even on a school board. He had no idea. He was a businessman, and frankly, he wasn't a very good businessman. He's been bankrupt 6 times. As my husband often says, if you do an analogy, if you had to have open heart surgery, are you going to a cardiologist that has an outstanding reputation, or are you going to go to the cardiologist that's had 6 malpractice suits? And, so for me, Trump, one, he was not a good businessman, even though it was touted that he was. He had no background in Washington. And then as I watched him with his administration, he just kind of felt he could do anything that he wanted to. And again, I go back to the thing of the way he insults and disrespects anybody and everybody.
mhm,
To me, like I say, with my 6 grandkids, I don't want them brought up that way. But, we're not supposed to be that way. We're not supposed to be mean, insulting. He's like a bully.
mhm.
And so definitely right away and I couldn't believe that others in the primary this year, somebody didn't come out ahead, that Trump kind of took over the party so fast.
Mhm.
And so I'm very, very concerned because it's not the Republican Party that it should be.
What would you say to people that are kind of considering what to do with their ballot, to either vote for Harris or just not vote at all? Like, what would you say to kind of help them to kind of resolve,
I
hey,
I would say you definitely need to vote, and you've got to think ahead to the future of the country. Like I said, I'm thinking my 6 grandchildren. I'm also very close to my great nephew and my great niece. I want them to live in America that my family moved here and we've seen that we've lived in. And I think people have to understand too. I get kind of concerned about the economic thing. We all forget. Everybody keeps bringing up, well, with Trump, it was so much better 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago under his administration. We all forget, well, not all of us, that COVID hit. COVID was a global impact.
mhm,
COVID brought down everything. It shut down industries. It brought down economies worldwide. And an economic cycle that I learned way back in economics in high school, it takes like 7 to 10 years to go back. So Trump was there at the tail end kind of COVID. He didn't handle COVID well because I'll be honest, by that time I was working in healthcare. I'm clinical. I worked at a hospital in Boston. I was in the ICU units of COVID patients where we'd have 355 patients in the hospital during one night.
yeah.
So first off, he didn't handle that properly either, the way he handled COVID. But I think people have to look at the economy, the cost of groceries, the cost of gas. You got to put it a little bit in perspective. COVID is what? actually made the economy really do a downturn across the world, not just in the United States. And along those lines too, I think with Trump, when was the last time Trump went to a grocery store? I bet you could probably count on your hand the 5 times he might have actually walked into a grocery store and bought groceries. So he doesn't understand the concerns of everyday Americans, and that the cost of groceries have gone up, the cost of gas has gone up, cost of rent has gone up. I don't hear anything from him about what he wants to do about the housing situation, whereas Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they have a plan. She has tax plans. She has tax credits that she wants to offer to young people, starting off with new children, $6,000 if you want to start your family. For those of us, 400,000 and under, the hardworking people of America, she doesn't plan to increase our taxes. She only plans to increase taxes on large corporations and on those both multi-billionaires. And there I'm going to do a thing with Trump that always bothered me. Every member that I worked for, and like I said, I worked for the Surgeon General, I worked for the Senator, they all had to turn in their financial report every year. They had to turn in their taxes. Everybody knew. All public officials high up had to do that, congressmen, senators, and every other president of the United States has released his taxes, but not Trump. So what is Trump hiding? What has Trump done that he's hiding his taxes, that he won't even let us know what his taxes are? So all those things way back when, and just his general character of insulting and disrespecting people, that turned me off right away from Trump.
Yeah, could definitely see that. It's interesting you brought up your role now as a healthcare professional, and of course your time working with the Surgeon General, right?
Yes, yes, I was with Dr. Nabel, the Surgeon General under Bush one.
What is your impression of seeing kind of, one of the things that really turned me off was that those daily press briefings where Trump was constantly interrupting Dr. Fauci in the midst of the pandemic before we had a vaccine in place, and then, doing things like suggesting that bleach would be a cure for COVID. What went through your head as a healthcare professional and as somebody who's kind of involved in public policy around healthcare? How did you feel about the way that Trump handled it, and how would you have handled it differently from what you saw the administration back then?
I was absolutely horrified, and that's the best way to say it. And I had the pleasure when I worked with it was Dr. Bells, the Surgeon General, I had the pleasure of actually being in meetings with Dr. Fauci. So I have been there. I have seen Dr. Fauci several times back then, and he is a dedicated doctor. He is a dedicated researcher. So for Trump to have disparaged him, he's worldwide, world renowned for what COVID was new to all of us. Even all the researchers, all the doctors. I can tell you, working in the ICU where we had people hooked up to the ventilators and stuff, the doctors were confused about why certain patients would make it. A very healthy male would make it, and a woman who would not make it, sorry. And then a woman who had diabetes, she had respiratory problems, she had heart ailments, 79 years old, she would make it, she would survive. So you had to rely on the medical people that really were the experts in it. And the way that Trump disparaged Dr. Fauci was just deplorable. And the way that he, took his mask off around other people, I mean, that did help keep the spread of COVID down. We didn't know what COVID was. We had never had it before. We had never experienced it before. So therefore, you have to put public safety precautions in. And people did have to wear masks, and we did have to isolate. And that was just the way it was. So I think, I was just horrified by how Trump handled the whole COVID situation.
hmm Yeah, yeah. It was really disappointing, kind of seeing, just seeing his lack of empathy towards a lot of the people as we're going through it, and then a lot of the conspiracy theories around it as well too, and even around the vaccine and trying to discourage people from actually taking the vaccine once it had been
Mhm.
developed to help stop this. Um, you know, uh, I mean, think about all the things that were talked about, the herd immunity and all of the other things over the years. I think a lot of people kind of forget about that. And so, kind of interested to about you. so you had mentioned you have six grandchildren, right? And so having kind of a larger family and kind of seeing, generation to generation, right? Do they understand this now? And is one of the things that Harris is trying to do in her campaign now is try to reach out to people that maybe didn't have, or maybe don't remember, or had different levels of experience, basically with some of that chaos that Trump caused in his first term as president here. Do they understand that? What's your kind of sense or message that you would say to people that are kind of in other generations too, about how they should consider, basically, as they're kind of looking at their vote here in this next week and a half?
Yeah, I think in some respects that we're too young to know what was going on and to realize that, and the impacts that something like that has on all society, everybody. Um, I just for young people, I wish people actually would go on to Kamala Harris's website and really see the things that she's saying and what she wants to do for us, tax wise, healthcare wise, everything. I think that not enough people really look into the issues. They just hear the little snippets they might hear on TV, but they don't actually check things out themselves. And it really concerns me for my grandkids. The threat to democracy, I think, is what really concerns me with Trump. Aside from, like I said, the way he's teaching kids to be bullies and insult and call people names. I don't want my grandchildren to be brought up that way or to do that to anybody. They should respect everybody. But he doesn't want to work with people. That's one thing you try to teach young people, to work together, to work with people, to respect other people. And what I see is a bully when I see Trump.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really kind of disappointing to kind of see the character issues. I don't think people, and I know the Democrats have sort of conflicting views within their own party about how to bring up the fact that he's a multi felon, and some of the different comments that he's made over the years. That really border, if not kind of stack on racism.
Yeah,
When you think about that.
he has court cases against him.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris, she was an attorney general. She helped put the criminals away. She stood by the law. She stands by the law. Trump doesn't. He tries to find any and all ways that he can get around the law, that he can postpone trial dates, that he does everything and anything he can to not follow the law. And there's no court case against her that I
Yeah.
know of.
No.
There's no court
No.
case against her. She's released her taxes. She's let us know. We know who she is. Trump hides everything. He hides behind all his falsehoods and his lies, and he keeps repeating those lies. Like, I feel so sorry for the people in Springfield where he said they were eating the cats and dogs. That they're not eating the cats and dogs. Those people came into this country legally, but because he stirred it up, he and Vance, and they kept
Mhm.
saying it over and over again, and all
Mhm.
the Republican cronies who won't stand strong and won't stand up to him kept repeating it. They had to have guards guarding the children at the elementary school and the
Mhm.
middle school. People are scared to walk into their grocery stores to buy groceries in Springfield, all
Mhm.
because of some comments that President Trump and Vance have made. And that's one thing: when you're the president of the United States, your words truly matter. Your
Mhm.
character truly matters. And as far as other people in other countries, I mean, he doesn't support NATO. He wants to do away with NATO. NATO is what has helped keep us all free and keep democracy alive. And he wants to disband that, and he wants to instead be friends with Putin and all these dictators. And he
Mhm.
admires Putin. He admires Putin, who could destroy this country any day now. I mean, that's probably Putin's ultimate goal, is to
Mhm.
destroy the United States. And he looks at him as being smart and kind of as his friend.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible to see that with Putin, with Kim Jong Un, with all of these different dictators. The way he's approached them is certainly un-American for sure. So for the Republicans that are kind of on the fence a little bit about, I think about some of the things that Trump has done in terms of like reproductive rights and the Supreme Court, and some of his work around the judiciary, getting himself immunity basically for any actions that he might take if he were reelected as president. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of weigh, there's a lot of different things there, right? There's right to life issues, there's the issues around our democracy. How do you sort of net that out as you're kind of considering it when you're thinking about where you place your vote, and what advice would you give to other people as they're, I'm sure there are people that I'm a fiscal conservative, so maybe I'm not the best person that has that. I don't know, where you stand kind of fiscally or socially, but how do you reconcile that? I guess as you're looking at all the different ways that you kind of look and consider your vote this year.
I would say that I'm like you. I'm a fiscal conservative, always have been. But I would say I'm a social moderate. Maybe that's because I work in healthcare. I was originally a nursing major before I then got into all the politics in Washington for the 25 years that I did public policy and health issues there. Now I'm back to the clinical side, so I've seen both sides. Um, I think it's up to the individual and their doctor and their family to decide what's best for them in any and all health situations. And it shouldn't be mandated by the courts. It shouldn't be mandated by legislative. It's not up to government entities and state senates and the federal government to decide. That is something that is up to each individual. Each man and woman should have a right to decide their own health concerns and what they want to do. So there I'm totally behind, and I'm very upset with what Trump did and very upset with what the Supreme Court did. I classify myself as pro-life with the exceptions of rape and incest and the health of a mother, and have always been that way. So as far as that's concerned, I'm very upset with what the judges are doing. I'm very upset with the judicial system where the judge in Florida, she withheld the court. She didn't hold the hearing. She didn't do what was needed to be done. I think that's where I wish people would pay more attention to when they're voting, because part of when you're on the ballot, go down the ballot, you're voting for some of the judges and other public figures, and that's important. So that concerned me that Trump did that. And it concerned me that McConnell was a big part of that, the senator who I used to work for and I used to respect, but now I am embarrassed to say that I work for Senator Mitch McConnell now. I really am, because he has not stood up to Trump. He is not the Senator McConnell I used to know and used to work for. His concern was the Constitution of the United States and American democracy. And he was devoted to that. But I don't know what has happened to him now. He's fallen onto the Trump bandwagon. I think, we've got to be very careful, because the one thing that really bothers me is that the Supreme Court made the decision that the president has immunity. The president is not above anybody else in this country. He's no better than you and me.
Hmm.
And kids, if they vandalized and somebody's house, even with toilet paper, or broke a window or whatever, they would be hauled off by the local police into jail.
Hmm.
Trump instigated, I don't care what you say, January 6th. And that's where I was really horrified.
Hmm.
Um, on January 6th, I had walked those hallowed halls of
Hmm.
Congress. I know exactly where the guy put the chair and smashed the window and broke in. I knew the corridors and the stairwells where they were going into the Capitol. And that's it's almost like a cathedral. It's like a sacred place, the Capitol of the United States. And Trump did nothing. He sat there for 3.5 hours and did nothing. And his own vice president, who now will not vote for him, will not support him. His own vice president's life was in jeopardy, and he did absolutely nothing. To me, that says it all right there. That he was supposed to be presidential. He was supposed to not incite the mob, and
Hmm.
he wasn't supposed to tell them to overthrow an election. That's my vote. That's
Hmm.
everybody in the United States' vote. That's our right to be able to vote. And he was going to take my vote away. He was going to take your vote away just because he wanted to win.
Yeah.
And and I was absolutely, again, horrified by what happened on January 6th. There's no excuse for that, and no excuse for how he did nothing that day to try to stop it. And once it started, he didn't do anything. He just sat there for 3 hours and over again. People will tell you, and there were people who were there, and that's why a lot of them have come out lately and said they are not for Trump. He just sat there. He didn't do anything. He had multiple people resign and walk out of the White House that day because
Yeah.
they were horrified by his inaction to do anything.
Yeah, it was really moving to kind of see the video of the security guard who was leading all of the rioters, the insurrectionists, away from
Mhm.
some of the rooms that were in once they broke into the Capitol building, right? If he hadn't done that, how fast would they have gotten in and really hurt people? Like it really think you really think about the damage that they did, that they weren't able to get into some of the rooms where people were sheltering in place,
Place.
really.
Oh, they were I have friends who were still on Capitol Hill that day, and they told me they were terrified. They were hiding in inner closets and rooms. They were hiding under desks, the cubbyhole of a desk where you put your feet. They were hiding there hoping that somebody and there was people pounding on their doors to
Yeah,
try to get in. I mean, there's no excuse for that. No excuse. And not in a democracy like the United States is. And absolutely no. And Trump is totally to be held responsible for that. He did nothing to discourage it the days before it or during it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's right away where, I mean, he totally lost. I mean, not that I ever would have really voted for him this time around anyway, but he totally lost any and all respect I had for him, aside from all the other reasons, not, you know, that I'm not supporting him.
yeah, yeah. What do you think the ultimate outcome is for the party in order to be able to kind of, there's been different ways. I think Liz Cheney has just said we just need to start anew all over again. Somebody who, I've been able to work with a little bit here has been Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan from Georgia, who came out with this book, GOP 2.0, and, has all sorts of different ways about like kind of where we should go forward with that. Do you have thoughts around that in terms of kind of where you see is the future of the party, or do we start a new party, or what do you
I think we have to kind of almost start a new party, or we have to reinvent the Republicans and get it back to the way it was. And there are plenty of people like, Liz Cheney, Governor Kasich. There are a whole bunch of other people that would be wonderful. Mitt Romney, even to start back the Republican Party the way it used to be, the way it should be.
Yeah,
It should be a party. Not a party of haters. Every time I see the Trump rallies, or they get some of the people who are and I know a lot of people who support Trump, and they're wonderful people and they're great people, but sometimes I don't think they're educated enough, that they're not really looking at the issues and not looking at where do we want to be 20 years from now in America. And the Republican Party just has to reinvent itself. It has to go back to, I mean, it was the party of Lincoln, for Pete's
yeah,
sakes. I read that in history. It was the party of Lincoln. Lincoln was the one who, even though the country was torn apart with the Civil War, he brought it back together again. That's what the party's supposed to be. And yes, you have different parties. There are different ways to go about different issues. Like I say, I'm more a fiscal conservative, so therefore I do lean more to being a Republican and always have been. Um, but I also respected my Democratic colleagues when I worked on the Hill. They had the right to have their view, and I had the right to have my view. But we didn't go at each other. We didn't scream and yell at each other. We didn't call each other awful names.
mhm,
And so that's what the Republican Party really does have to reinvent themselves. So they really do. They have to go
mhm,
back. And there are a lot of really decent Republicans out there. And I think what really has surprised me, and again, that's where I say I'm just really disappointed in Senator McConnell these days. And I am embarrassed when I tell people that I was his press secretary and I worked for him, because the Mitch McConnell I knew would have stood up to some of the stuff that Trump was saying. He
mhm,
would have done it in a very respectful way, said, Senator Trump, or President Trump, I disagree with the issue. I disagree with what you're saying. He's not even doing that. And a lot of these other Republicans are just kowtowing. They know Trump is lying. They know they're false. I mean, come on, they know people in Springfield aren't eating dogs and cats.
yeah,
But some of them are defending what Trump and Vance said about that, and they aren't standing up now. Like Nikki Haley, at least she stood up and she started to, call out his falsehoods and lies.
mhm,
um, in school you'd never get away with that. Your teacher wouldn't let you get away with that. So why are all these Republicans so afraid that if they stand up to Donald Trump and they say what he's saying, which is in many cases is a lie or a falsehood, why are they so afraid of saying there's no truth to that? Here's
yeah.
the real truth. And they aren't doing that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think One of the reasons why I think that's happening too is because we as a base have not really rallied. We've let the loudest voices in the room sort of take over, and that turns
Yes,
out to be the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world.
Greens.
We as conservatives really need to be a little bit more vocal and kind of what Nixon called the silent majority, right, and stand up a
Well,
little
and
bit
I think
more.
that that's part of being a conservative is you tend to, you don't want to be gland-handed. You don't want to be up front on the stage. You want to, you don't have to be the center point of focus of everything. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, eh, I don't care what party she is with. I wouldn't even care if she was with the Communist Party. I think she is totally disrespectful of her fellow congressional colleagues. She's totally disrespectful of people in general. She's rude, she's arrogant, she's only in it for herself. That's not what a politician is supposed to be. That's not what a senator or a congressman or a president is supposed to be. They're supposed to be working for the good of the country, which is what Kamala
Mhm.
and Tim Walz will do. You can see that. I mean, all her career, she could have been a high priced lawyer, attorney, making boku bucks somewhere at a law firm, but she didn't. She chose to serve the people. She was a district attorney. She was an attorney general. She's always put others before her. Trump does not put people before him. He doesn't understand. He's never really lived the everyday, everyman life. He hasn't had a job where he was being paid minimum wage. Like she worked at McDonald's. I was a waitress when I was going through college. We got minimum wages and tips. That's how we made our money. He's never had that. He's always grown up with the silver spoon in his mouth and houses that have gold plated ceilings. So he really does not understand how every man does and every woman lives in this country, United States.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely is out of touch with actually who she is supposed to represent, kind of the base, really. A lot of
Mhm.
the middle class that really are so fundamental to our open economy and being able to do so many things that will be able to allow us to drive the economic engine of America, and so that's definitely concerning. So just, really kind of a last question here really for you. What do you think is going to happen with this election from a North Carolina standpoint? Do you think, obviously a lot of comments about Mark Robinson and a lot of the extremism that kind of bore from the MAGA Republicans here. You think about, Michael Watley basically being in charge of the NCGOP when Robinson was kind of coming up, and now being sort of one of Donald Trump's stooges, basically taking over the RNC with Laura Trump on a national level. Do you think that that's how do you think that's going to translate in terms of the up and down the ballot here in North Carolina? Do you think that should people also kind of vote for Democrats down the ballot as well too? And what do you think is going to happen there? Do you think a lot of stuff?
That's sort of been my philosophy, and I can use my own life experiences too. I lived in Maryland for a while, and the mayor of Baltimore then ran for the governor, and he was a Democrat. He did an outstanding job in Baltimore. He did an outstanding job as governor. So I crossed the aisle. I voted for him. He was a Democrat. He was a much better candidate than what the Republican candidate was for governor. So I think the people have got to look at the person who is running for office. Do they have the values, the qualities? Do they have the background for the job? So in my case, there have been times I mostly always vote Republican, but even as I've gone down the ballot, there are many times I have voted for the Democratic candidate because they've been the better, more experienced person, the better one, more qualified for that position. So, and I'm going to vote for the Democratic governor and this time around too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, we really appreciate that. Well, listen, MJ Murphy, thank you so much for your time. To everybody who's watching this too, if you are interested in getting more involved, look, this is this one election cycle, and this is a very, very important one because we need to send a message to stop Donald Trump. But he had a lot of help getting to this point, and so it's important that we send a message up and down the ballot, anybody who is running for office, if you're going to be in this extremist group and cause the amount of chaos that we have seen in our country, then we need to rally together as principled conservatives to be able to oppose you. And a lot of us have really come together in this election cycle. We met a lot of people that we never thought we'd be working with on the Democratic side of the aisle, but also a lot of other Republicans who didn't know how to get involved, were maybe intimidated to be involved. And so if you're of that group, join us at Republicans for Harris NC is in northcarolina.com. We're just getting started. We hope that we will have your support here in the next week and a half. But above and beyond that, we will be continuing this effort because it's going to continue beyond just the next 12 days here. We're going to need help to be able to send the message that this extremism is no longer going to be tolerated. And we need to be able to have some civility and get back to actually having productive government. That's something that MJ was a part of, and we hope that we're able to bring that back. And so really, really appreciate your time being able to share, the history of the Republican Party and some of the principles that you have stood for and stand for today. And would love to have you continue to be involved here. Anything else that you want to say to people, just for kind of a point to be able to leave people with as they're considering what to do here and kind of moving forward in their lives?
Yeah, I just think that it's very important that we have the right, we have the freedom to vote. There are other countries where they can't vote. We have the right to vote, and we should vote. Everybody should get out and vote, but make yourself educated and really think about, where do you want to be 20, 50 years from now? Where do you want this country to be? Think about your children, your grandchildren. What kind of leaders do you want them to look up to and respect, and to lead this country forward? We're a great country. We're not a third world country and a negative country like Trump says we are. We're a great country. We have so much going for us. We have so much opportunity for the future and for our children. So it's important that you get out and vote, but vote for the right person, up and down the ballot, even your city council, your school board, whatever. Vote for the people who will really be concerned about your community, concerned about the country, that really, really, truly care about other people and respect other people and the values and our Constitution of the United States and our democracy. We are a shining light to the world, and let's continue to do that. So look up and down the ballot. Don't ignore any of your school board members that are up for election, all the local. It's important that you get the right people all the way down from the cities to the counties to the state to the presidency of the United States.
Amazing. Well, on that note, thank you all very much. We're going to sign off here. Again, join us on our website. Register, get out and vote. The polls are now open in North Carolina, and you can do this today. I think you're doing this right now, right, MJ?
Yep, my husband and I, as soon as we get off the phone here, we're going to vote.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you again so much, and we will be back out to you and back in touch. If you follow us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, and the sky's the limit on where we can go here. But we need to get together and stand up and do this. So, thank you all. Good luck and God bless. Let me